Welcome back to Fuel Up Classic. Now, I have often said in my videos that I want to show the highs and the lows and indeed the costs of classic car ownership. Now, my MGB GT V8 has been with me for just under a year now. I cannot quite believe that that time has gone so quickly. But as you may expect with any 50-plus-year-old, quite rare really in the grand scheme of things car, there's been a few bumps in the road, to say the least. Well, I've consulted my notepad and I've gone through the invoices from the last 12 months. I've looked at the mileage that I've covered and I have written down what's gone wrong, what it's all cost, and also what's next for this car. Because you may not be alone in noticing, and it's one of the reasons I bought it in the first place, apart from I love the way it looks, I love the way it sounds, but also in the world of YouTube, there's so little content out there on these factory V8 cars. They are really rather rare. Just 2,591 of these cars were built over 3 years. Now, when you compare that to the total number of MGBs built, being well in excess of 500,000, you start to see just how rare these cars are. GTs, I think they built something like 125,000 of them. This, a tiny, tiny fraction of overall MGB production. And I think it deserves its spotlight. And even more so, I want to document my journey with owning this car, the highs, the lows, and the costs that, of course, I have incurred in between. I don't know if you do this at home, and maybe you should if you own a classic car, or maybe you shouldn't if you don't want a bit of a shock, but just write down what's gone wrong over the last year or so and what it's cost you, because sometimes it can be a bit of a sobering sight, believe me. But the car itself, when I bought it, was by no means a restoration project. It's nothing like my other MGB GT, which is very much a project. This car had been in long-term ownership for over 40 years. I am only the third owner of this car from new, and the person I bought it from had clearly loved and cherished it for many, many, many decades. And I took a lot from that. I had to promise that I would use it, improve it, and indeed make memories with it. And I hope I'm setting out that brief. I hope we're doing that just right. But, as I mentioned, it's not been plain sailing. So let me just give you a very brief list of what's gone wrong. And of course, we're going to start with the electrics, because old British cars, they don't have a great reputation for their reliability of the electrics. We've all heard the Lucas Prince of Darkness jokes and all of those things that get floated around. Well, I'll be honest with you, I used to always say that was mostly rubbish and all a bit overhyped. But the vast majority of issues I have had with this car have been electrical. So I guess I kind of have to eat my own words a little bit. But let's start with the electrical issues that I've had over the last year. The first one, the big one, was the cooling fans simply stopped working. And now that's a little bit scary when you're stuck in traffic with one of these, because that big 3.5 litre V8 engine, it kicks out a lot of heat. It needs the air circulating around that engine bay to keep things cool. Luckily, I managed to get the car home when I realised there was a problem, kept it moving, kept the airflow coming in, and things stayed cool. But as soon as you would let the car sit idle, it would creep up very, very quickly. So we had to do a bit of investigative work. It turned out the wiring itself to the cooling fans had simply melted. We were really quite lucky that a fire didn't start in the engine bay. It wasn't far away from catching fire. It really was that bad. So it went off to my specialist who has worked on MGs for decades, and he went through the car front to back. I needed peace of mind that essentially we weren't going to end up with a very, very unreliable car that could catch fire at any point. And whilst it was there, as I'm sure you've all been there with classic cars, one problem led into two, led into three, led into four, and before you know it, you've got to do them before you can get the car back. The wiring was sorted for the fans, and thankfully everything was back in action. The V8 was kept nice and cool as it should be. But my ongoing saga with these headlights, I've had so many issues with this. I have had a failure of the rocker switch on the dashboard. Nice simple fix, did it at home on the driveway. Then they worked again for a few weeks. Then I just couldn't get them to work at all. It turns out that the headlamp bowls themselves that sit in the wings had simply corroded away over time. The connections were all corroded up. It wasn't getting a good earth or anything like that. So the headlights were brought out, everything cleaned up, new headlight bowls, new wiring connection, because that had also got a little bit warm and toasty where it shouldn't have done, and new headlights put back in. And I have to say, for about 3 weeks, they worked perfectly. But then, of course, we moved on to the next problem, which was the switch itself on the steering column then failed. So I think there's not actually that much left in the headlight circuitry of this car that we haven't gone through and inspected and indeed replaced. So that's been the two electrical headaches that I had quite early on into ownership. And then after that, well, the temperature gauge just packed up one day and wouldn't read anything whatsoever. So I had to get a new temperature gauge, V8 specific on this one. I'll get onto that a little bit later in the video. But after that, the horn stopped working. So it was another electrical issue that we had to go through. Nothing too strenuous, just a lot of head scratching. Unfortunately, a little bit of labour to diagnose and indeed rectify these faults. Oh, and of course the alternator failed as well. Another electrical problem, I forgot about that one. I took the opportunity to fit an MGOC uprated alternator on this one, and so far everything seems to be good. This one is still running its original, obviously not original, but the original setup of a twin 6-volt batteries in the back. And at the moment, everything seems to be as it should be. So that's been the main issues with the car, mostly electrical. I did have a strange problem where after a long journey, I would struggle to engage reverse with it. It's quite common on MGBs, but this car has had a full gearbox rebuild about 5,000 miles ago. So I was reasonably confident it was nothing massively wrong with it. And indeed, a little bit of time, stripping down the center console, having a good look at things, soon showed that there was a problem with the actual selector itself. It was just simply jamming and wouldn't allow the car to engage reverse properly. A simple fix, and sometimes the simple fixes can be the most satisfying, because now this car has got that lovely, almost rifle bolt precision gear change that I love of an MGB, and it would always been lacking in this car. Compared to my Mark 1 66B GT, which is just out of shot there, that has the most wonderful gear change. This one never lived up to it. I'm happy to say it does now. So on that journey, I have noted a few things. One, MGOC Spares and the MG Owners Club have helped me out no end with advice, with parts, and everything has been pretty readily available, and I must say reasonably priced. It's really helped with ownership, because I don't come from living with these cars when they were new. They're much older than I am. It's been really good to sort of be able to have people on the end of the phone or in constant contact that do know these cars inside out, and they're always willing to help. So I must give a thank you to them. But I have also discovered that V8 specific parts, now the vast majority of engine bits, you're not going to have a problem. It's a Rover V8, it's tried and tested, pretty much everything's available. And the same for everything that's MGB. Easily available, not that expensive, not too much trouble. But V8 MGB specific things can be a little bit different. The wheels, for example, I am in desperate need of replacing these because they are really, really bad now. But a new set, and yes, you can buy uprated 15-inch wheels for this. Well, you're looking at, by the time you put a new set of tyres on it, the best part of £3,000. That's a big spend. So I then went down the route of looking at, well, how much will it be to get these properly refurbished? And by that, they need to be chromed, they need to be painted, they need to be done properly. Well, it's still the best part of £2,000. And by that point, you're going to put some new tyres on it. It's going to be £2,500 by the time you're finished. Big numbers, especially if you're used to a standard MGB. And I know I could take the opportunity and put some aftermarket wheels on it, but that's not for me. I love these original V8 Dunlop wheels. They suit the car perfectly. And I was lucky, very, very lucky to be given a really good set of second-hand V8 wheels that will be going on the car in the spring. As soon as the salt's cleared off the road, I will be putting those on the car. And that also brings me on, I've spent a little bit more elsewhere on some things that didn't essentially need to be done, but I did them anyway. When the new wheels go on, I'm also going to have a brand new set of stainless steel bumpers put on this car. They've only just come on the market in recent months. Reviews seem to be really, really good. But nonetheless, that was the best part of a £700 spend just for a pair of bumpers. I will keep the originals, and maybe one day I'll get them re-chromed if I need to. But that's all cost quite a lot of money. And the total number of things, this is the important bit, this is the reason for the video. Well, I've spent £477 on parts alone, majority from MGOC spares. I spent roughly around £700 on the set of bumpers, as I said. And I've spent £1,084 on labour with my specialist to get this car up to a better standard. There is still work to be done, but in 2,000 miles and about 12 months of ownership, I have spent £2,261 on parts and labour for this vehicle. And really, we don't have to be a genius to work out, that is near enough £1 a mile, which sounds expensive, but seems to be a figure that I always come back to for some reason. My old Jaguar seems to run around the same sort of ownership costs. Some cars can indeed be an awful lot more, some of them can be less. But a lot of that spend has been in bringing this car, recommissioning it in some way, a very light recommissioning, but a lot of it has been spent on that. But of course, we're not done yet. We're never really going to be done. Are you ever done really with a 50-plus-year-old car? There's always jobs to be done. But the next stage in my journey with this, I want to improve the car cosmetically. I do not want it to be a show winner. I do not want it to be a concourse car by any means. I just want to improve on what we have. And by that, I mean the wheels will be fitted with new centres, new bumpers, just to lift all the bright work on the car. The car will be going off to probably the MGOC workshop or possibly somewhere else. I haven't quite decided yet on having some paintwork rectification. There's a couple of little dings and dents around the car that I want to get sorted. Have this lovely blaze orange paintwork buffed up, make it nice and bright and shiny again, which I don't think it's been polished since this car was fully restored back in the early 90s. So there are a few little spends coming my way. I also have a bit of an ongoing thing with squeaky brakes on this car. Although we've tried to lubricate everything, strip things down, free things off, I think we are looking at new disc calipers and pads on the front to try and stop this brake squeak when things are hot. So that's the next journey. That's what it's cost so far, and that's what's gone wrong. Now, I will leave you at home to decide whether you think it's all been worth it, whether you think it's been extravagantly expensive. When you work things out on a pound per mile basis, it can be a little bit difficult to get your head around a £1 a mile figure. But I will also say insurance for this car, fully comprehensive policy, agreed value of around £20,000. So it's not a cheap car. It's certainly the higher end of MGBs, that's for sure. Just £156 a year to insure the car. Of course, no road tax here in the UK because it's over 40 years old and it's registered as a historic vehicle. So that's another nice little saving that comes with having an older vehicle. So there are the outline facts. Miles per gallon has been about 25 on average. I don't think that's too bad considering the age and the type of vehicle. It's been quite the journey so far. I don't regret my decision. I have enjoyed getting to know this rare piece of Abingdon's and indeed MG's history. And I'm excited to see what the rest of 2025 brings. I would really like to take this car on a bit of a European road trip. in the future. I'm thinking maybe Spa Classic, or we've got Le Mans Classic a little bit later on. Maybe this would be the ideal car to bomb down to Le Mans for a week of fun and really put it to the test. To my knowledge, I don't think the car has ever ventured outside of the UK. So it would be quite fun to do that. There we have it, a short video. I do understand that it may not be the most interesting thing in the world, but hopefully I'm doing my little bit to inform people that are curious about MGB GT V8 ownership and the reality of running one. I will do some update videos in the future as I go ahead and do more things. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And I've got some great cars lined up in some future videos to review. And I've also got to tell you what's happening with my other classic cars, because it's all got a little bit expensive lately.